So it appears that Sean Hannity is a little bit perturbed with some of the MAGA base, espousing what sounds to him like left wing populist beliefs. Wow, Sean. Before we get into what Fox News' Sean Hannity had to say about his own MAGA viewers, let's take a listen to Scott Galloway, who is the professor of marketing at NYU Stern School of Business. He's been making the rounds talking about income inequality and what the next couple generations are going to be facing financially in this country if things don't change.
The average tax rate on the wealthiest 25 Americans is 6%. Corporate tax rates are at their lowest point since 1939. Now, the bottom 50% don't pay much federal income tax, but they pay a lot in usage and consumption taxes. But this misdirect talking about tax rates misses the point. It's the tax code, which has gone from 400 pages to 4,000. And that 3,600 pages, quite frankly, is there to screw the middle class and continue to transfer more money to the super wealthy. The fastest growing demographic group in America is not seniors. It's not Latins. It's billionaires. We had 500 billionaires 10 years ago. We now have 2,500.
Hannity is not happy about the populists, and he made that clear during a recent episode of his show. Let's watch.
I've even heard some Trump supporters say they want to soak the rich. You sound like Bernie Sanders. You want to soak the rich. When I didn't have any money and I was a contractor, I never got hired by a poor person. In my 10 years in the restaurant business, I never got a tip from a poor person. No, I want a thriving economy where Americans have high-paying career jobs.
So what he's saying is, an oxymoron. You can't have an economy where all the benefits and all the spoils go to the top 1% or the top 10% to the rich. You can't have that and have high-paying jobs for regular people. And the reason why many of the rich are so rich is because they don't give good tips and they don't, give money away to poor people. I am so sick and tired of this narrative that giving tons of taxpayer money and giving tons of tax cuts to the rich somehow is going to trickle down onto just us regular peasants, right? That somehow if you take the cups of the rich and they runneth over with money, with billions of dollars, then somehow that runs over and rains on the little people, and that's how we'll get our money, by holding our hands up, underneath the billionaires and letting them rain down whatever they feel like given to us. It's ridiculous.
There's actually data showing that those who are lower on the socioeconomic ladder tend to give more to charity than incredibly
How about
wealthy
that?
individuals. But nonetheless, that was Sean Hannity, who is not happy about a trend he's seeing in the United States, a trend that he's seeing even within the Republican electorate. And that trend has to do with populism. This fury that Americans are feeling over growing inequality and the fact that the corporate world has completely taken over our political system, has completely bought our politicians, along with certain media figures like the one you just heard from. And while Hannity clearly doesn't understand why Americans of all political persuasions want to soak the rich, most Americans understand that it does have to do with ever-growing wealth inequality, and we have plenty of evidence to prove it. So let's start.
So, yeah, he can't understand it, right? He doesn't understand how some of his MAGA audience is, espousing beliefs that are normally seen on the left. But what he doesn't understand is that the same people that voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and joined MAGA were the people who had supported Bernie Sanders in the Democratic primary. And it was because Donald Trump in 2016 ran as a populist. He ran as somebody who was among the rich and that had and somebody who had abused the loopholes and the tax cuts and the worship of billionaires that we have in this country, that all the benefits go to them. And he was going to get in office and turn it on its head and drain the swamp and finally give a win to working and middle class people. That's what he ran on. That's not how he governed once he got in, but that's how he ran as a candidate. And a lot of his supporters believed him. That's what they voted for. So to me, it's not a shock that some in the MAGA community are espousing, populist beliefs. It makes complete sense to me.
Start with this. The typical Fortune 500 CEO had already made more money by January 2nd than the average US worker will make
2
this
days.
entire year. Okay, so not the average MAGA supporter, not the average woke liberal, but the average American worker. And this is where I think Americans of all political persuasions find common ground. And if they're willing to work together to hold their politicians accountable to ensure that they're actually serving us,
Mhm.
the American people,
Mhm.
as opposed to the corporate overlords that they've been serving, that might cut into some of the money that people like Sean Hannity have been happily making all these years. Now,
Yes.
and by the way, happily making as a mouthpiece for corporate America.
So imagine that, right? So MAGA, by and large, has never held Donald Trump accountable. And that's what I've always seen as the danger, right? It wasn't Donald Trump's rhetoric. It wasn't his policies. It was the fact that, unlike those in the Democratic Party who will rip into our leaders, right? You know, we took Joe Biden right the frick out. We did not give a shit. You know, and we will turn on each other in a second. So we will turn on our leaders in a second. We will go and protest, right? We do not care. We're not beholden to one person or personality. You know, we have our beliefs and they are our beliefs. They don't change with the tide. And MAGA, by and large, does not hold Donald Trump or the Republican leaders accountable or responsible for any of their promises or any of their policies or any of the actions they take. Could you imagine if MAGA took to the streets and protested it? These tax cuts for the rich that Donald Trump wants to do on day one, that's their priority. Republicans and Trump, their priority is to get more tax cuts for the rich, for the corporations, and expand and extend the tax cuts in 2017, 83% of which went to the top 1%, I believe. It went to the top, earners, top, billionaires, 83%. Imagine that. Imagine what would happen. Or maybe nothing would happen. Maybe it would be like the H-1B visa situation where Donald Trump would just again side with the billionaires, but at least MAGA would know where it really stood, right? Whether Donald Trump really cared about them after all, or whether he was just playing them to get elected so he could do for himself and the rest of his billionaire buddies.
Here's another stunning statistic that has to do with the holiday season specifically. We've talked about consumer debt and how it's at record highs. Well, a lot of Americans felt that they had no choice but to take out more debt in order to afford the holidays. Over a third of Americans took on debt this holiday season in order to make seasonal purchases like gifts. And that's according to a December survey by Retail Dive. And the amount of debt that Americans are taking out during the holidays is increasing more and more year after year. So let's take a look at the next graphic that shows you that consumers took on an average debt of $1,181 this holiday season, up from the $1,028 in 2023, with the vast majority of shoppers using credit cards, store cards, and buy now, pay later services, which are a disaster, to make purchases. 60% of consumers who took on debt say they were stressed doing it, probably because it's not just that they're taking on some debt for the holiday season, it's that they're already drowning in debt just to afford the basics. Certainly, the era of inflation during the Biden administration has played a huge role in making it more difficult for Americans to afford basic items that they need for their households. And so, yeah, this is a huge issue. And I understand that rage. It doesn't matter what your political identity is. If you're a working class American, you know exactly where the anger and frustration is coming from, and you know that it's justified. It's hard for someone like Hannity, who makes millions of dollars anchoring on Fox News, to understand it, because he's not hungry for anything. Okay, he's good. So for him to sit there and fearmonger about populists is hilarious to me.
It's hilarious to me too. It's completely freaking ridiculous. And she makes a good point about debt. A lot of people who are in the working class, because let's face it, there's no real middle class anymore. In order for you to live truly a middle class life where you can really afford stuff, where you own your own home outright, where you can go buy a car without going into debt, where you don't have to use credit cards every month to pay for groceries. You have to make, I would say, $250,000 to $300,000 a year. That's what you have to be bringing in order to be truly middle class in this country. Those of us who are making between, I would say, 80,000 and 200,000, who call ourselves middle class, it's a smokescreen. It's a mirage. We are only making, like I said, 80 to 200,000, and 200,000 might be a little much. It's probably more like 80,000 to 150,000. The rest of it is debt. We're in approximately $50,000 to $100,000 in debt. That's the rest of our income. That's where the rest of our income is coming from. So it's making us feel like we're more well off than we actually are. But we've been so conditioned in this country for credit card debt and loans to be the norm that we've just accepted it. And so we think we're in the middle class. We think we're doing fine. And when Republicans scare us about, the Democrats want to tax the middle class, they want to raise your taxes. People think, oh, they're more well off than they are. So, they're against that. They vote against that, but they're actually voting against their own best interest, which is for rich people to pay more taxes so our taxes can be cut. We'll have more money in our pocket and we won't have to take on so much debt.
What do you think, Cenk?
Yeah, so many things here. First of all, him saying, I never got a tip from a poor person. Really? You worked at a restaurant and you never got a tip from a poor person? Like, what, you think like the poor people are some sort of like monsters and they come into restaurants, but they leave zero tip?
It's ridiculous.
I mean, he's just such a jerk. And he has such contempt for non-rich people. And it oozes from everything that he says. So
I would like to, I just make a point about tipping, right? It's those of us that understand that the people that are serving us our food aren't making that much money and that they rely on tips because they don't even make a minimum wage, an hourly minimum wage. Most of their money comes from tips that tip the highest because we actually understand and can empathize with their situation because we're in the same situation. So when we have enough money, and it's not even enough money. When we decide we're going to splurge, part of that splurge is given a nice healthy tip to our waiters. And that's for most of us. That's not all of us, but most of us do that.
It's old school right-wing media. And one of the things I realized when I went on a lot of these right-wing shows is this is not the same right-wing media that we've known. In some ways, on social issues, they're more radical than even Fox News was. But on populism and economic issues, they're not at all where Fox News was. So what Sean Hannity is saying is classic old school right-wing media. The poor should shut up and know their role. You middle class, you should also shut up and understand that the most valuable people in the country are the very rich. We give you jobs. We give you tips. We give you everything. You should just be thanking us, okay?
Yep, you should thank us for whatever we decide to give you, right? Trickle down economics. Whatever we decide to rain down on you, whatever we decide that we're going to give you for salaries, for bonuses. If we decide we're going to give you health care, and a lot of these, big corporations, they provide health care that people are paying hundreds of dollars a month into, and they really don't get much out of it. The deductibles and the copays are so outrageous that the people can't even really use it.
That is old school establishment propaganda. Remember,
yes,
right wing and left wing and Fox News and MSNBC is just good cop, bad cop. Establishment Democrats, establishment Republicans, good cop, bad cop. They're driving towards the same thing. The rich and the powerful should remain rich and powerful, and the rest of you should know your role.
Yes.
And so, to me, his statement there is proof positive that I'll just personalize it to me, that I was right, that there's now a different base for the right wing. Doesn't mean that they're all angels or they agree with us on everything. But look at Sean Hannity complaining about his own base. Say, what are you guys doing? You guys sound like Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. I told you. Some of them, when you go talk to them on economic issues, they sound like us. Take a yes for an answer. I'm begging you, take yes for an answer. So those are folks that we can go and convince to form a populist bloc that Sean Hannity's of the world and Fox News will despise. And I got news for you. MSNBC will also despise it because they are the establishment. And now you see Sean Hannity panicking
corporate media
over
is
the
corporate
new
media
right-wing base. And I love it.
Yeah. And one other thing that I'll say, because this is the kind of information that pisses off a lot of people, again, across the political spectrum, working class Americans. Let's go to the last graphic here, where More Perfect Union posts that the 12 richest people in America have a combined wealth of over $2 trillion. In contrast, the poor 50% of America, about 167 million people, have a combined net worth of $3.8 trillion. So it just helps you to understand how much, you want to talk about a redistribution of wealth. There has been a multi-decade redistribution of wealth from the bottom to the top. Mm-hmm. And to the anti-war component of Trump's base, it's not just that we're using our resources in foreign wars and conflicts that we shouldn't be involved in. I get the sense that they also understand that the war machine is another way to redistribute wealth from the bottom to the top. Because think about it. We're the ones, the working class Americans who pay their taxes. Huge component of that, a huge chunk of that goes to the military industrial complex. A country like Israel that had, an economic surplus in 2021 is somehow entitled to like tens of billions of dollars in US taxpayer money to afford their weapons for the brutality they're carrying out in Gaza? How does that make any sense? So, look, I think that there's power in numbers. And I think for the first time, populist Americans on both the right and the left realize that maybe there are some issues where there's agreement and we can work together. Let's see if that actually comes to fruition, because certainly there are people who don't want to accomplish a damn thing and like their, partisan corner where they can point to the other side and moralize about how they're allegedly better than the other side.
Yeah. And that's the thing, right? Is it going to come to something? Can the right wing get its head out of its ass long enough to look up and smell, the Trump farts, right? That he's been laying out and telling them it's roses. Like, can they figure it out, right? Can they separate the fact that Trump is saying what they want to hear on immigration, but his actions don't match his words at all? Like, they're the exact opposite. And that he's using immigration and pushing that stuff to cover up for the fact that he wants to just give tax cuts to himself and his buddies, that he wants to enrich himself, that they want to loot the treasury, that they want to funnel more money to the military industrial complex. Why do you think he's talking about military operations in Iran, Canada, Greenland, the Panama Canal, Mexico? Why do you think he's talking like that? Because if he really ended all wars, what would happen to the military industrial complex, corporations who have largely donated to his campaigns and funds his campaigns, right? Like, there's no way that that's going to happen. So he's going to find more wars to get ourselves in, right? So that he can keep funneling money to these people who have put him where he is. We need to stop fighting with each other over culture war nonsense. Okay? Neither the left or the right leadership is going to do anything real on immigration. They do not care about us. They do not care about working and middle class people. They have gladly for the last several decades worked together to destroy the middle class, to destroy any regulations that helped us, and to continually give bigger and bigger tax cuts to the rich. Before Ronald Reagan took office, the top tax rate was 70%. That's not what they were paying. That's what they started at. And then they would use the loopholes. On average, the rich were paying, I think, on over 5 million or 200,000, I think it was. They would pay 50%, on anything over 200,000. And then Ronald Reagan comes in, and by the time he, leaves office, the top tax rate was 28%. Like that was the nominal tax rate. What they were paying, 28%. That is, it's substantial. And we wonder why we have debt. We wonder why we don't have enough money for healthcare and the things that people need. And we stopped taxing the rich. And we only started, we increased taxes for middle class people and slightly upper middle class people and decimated the middle class. That's what we did. And we need to reverse it. That's the only way to fix things in this country. Thank you so much if you made it this far. Please share, do all the things, comment, subscribe. If you would like more content like this, I am just working on weekends now, but I'm really trying to provide some clarity in this divisive, divided political climate. And so I would really like your help in doing that by spreading these videos. And, I do try to be neutral. I do try to put my left leanings on hold a bit because I'm trying to see things from a different point of view. And I'm trying to bring people together on economics because, we're all in the same boat economically, working class and middle class people. And, even wealthy people. If our economy collapses, we're all going to suffer, including them. So, I'm trying to get the word out. So I really appreciate it. Please, like I said, subscribe, comment, share. do all the things that everybody asks you to do all the time. But thank you. I appreciate everybody who supports me already, and who always, likes, always watches my videos. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it from the bottom of my heart. If you have any suggestions on topics you want to see on here, you see an article or something, please send it to me. Jonah, stop. Please send it to me, because I would be happy to research it and do a video on it as soon as I possibly can. All right. Thank you.